So the whole idea about life is instead of learning by trial and error, you want to learn from the trials and errors of others. You want to learn from the experiences of others. Nowhere is this more important than parenting. So in today's episode, I am going to give you some of my favorite books about parenting, the best parenting lessons. Let us start with a book that I think is actually a parenting book in disguise. This is David Epstein's Range. Basically looks at two great athletes, Tiger Woods and Roger Federer. Now, each equally masters dominant of their profession, and yet they had very different paths. Tiger Woods is introduced to golf at a very young age. He basically has what we would now call a tiger parent. His dad forces him to specialize in this thing at the expense of everything else. And then Roger Federer doesn't even seriously pick up tennis until high school. One has a lot of range, has a lot of experiences, and one is specialized intensely, again, at the expense of almost everything else. And the message of this book, the idea of range, is that one of those paths is sustainable, and one of those paths almost inevitably, invariably ends in burnout and destruction. And it's not just true in sports. John Stuart Mill, the philosopher, this happens to him. Things don't end well for Tiger Woods. You want to create balance and structure and range for kids. They're far more resilient. I always give this book, even though it doesn't seem like a parenting book, it actually is. This is one of my all-time favorite parenting books, and I'll summarize it in like 2 sentences. You're not going to be good at being a parent. You're going to mess up all the time. So what you have to get really good at is repair. How do you fix? How do you learn from what happened? How do you apologize? How do you make the relationship stronger and better as a result of what has happened? It's just a lovely, beautiful book. Dr. Becky has helped me not just as a reader, but she's given me a bunch of great parenting advice when I've talked to her over the years, including a very difficult conversation I had to have with my son. Cannot recommend this book highly enough. You gotta raise an outdoor kid. We live in an inside world, screens, computers, phones, all that stuff. You want an outdoor kid. And that's why I love this book, Outdoor Kids in an Inside World. Steve Rinella, an amazing hunter, outdoorsman. And this book just sort of changed my philosophy on parenting, changed my approach to parenting. He has this, you want a kid that doesn't say ew a lot, right? Or gross a lot. Kids that are okay getting their hands dirty, that can take care of themselves outside, that have a sense of adventure, that love the outside world, and that's what this book is all about. I've given this as a gift to so many different parents when people come into the bookstore. Just an absolutely amazing book. All right, these are 2 books that have titles that even if you don't read the books, and you should, the title itself gives you kind of like a target to aim for or a mantra to repeat. That's Ron Lieber's The Opposite of Spoiled. If you're trying to think about what kind of relationship you want your kids to have with money or material things, wherever you are on the socioeconomic spectrum, you want to raise a kid who is the opposite of spoiled. That's a great phrase. And then this other one that I love, where is it? How to raise kids who are not assholes. How to raise kids who aren't assholes. You want a kid that's not a jerk, that treats people well, that's capable of kindness and compassion and empathy, right? That's the opposite of spoiled, that, is just a good person in the world. That's what success is. So I love these 2 books. The Stoic idea that we can turn every obstacle into an opportunity, that we have to get better for the things that happen to us. Jessica Lahey's book is one of my all-time favorites, The Gift of Failure. You don't want your kids to feel sad. You don't want them to feel bad. You don't want them to feel hurt. So what you can end up doing, and what has become a trend these days, is you remove all difficulty from their lives. You insulate them from things. They forget their homework, so you rush to school to bring it. They're struggling with that homework, so you do it for them. You don't want them to not get into an impressive college and get to spend time with their friends, so you write their college essay for them. What you do, you're insulating them from difficulty, from stress, from strain. We call these snowplow parents. What you're actually depriving them of is the incredible gift that is failure, because it's from failure, from pain, from discomfort that we learn. It's from resistance that we grow stronger, and that's what this book is all about. I love this book. You shouldn't just read parenting books, like what are supposed to be parenting books. I think you should read biography and history. This is one of my favorite books, Churchill and Son by Josh Ireland. Churchill had absolutely awful parents. He tried to do better than his parents, and yet he failed in many ways. So this is a story of kind of multi-generational trauma and failure in some ways, but at least Churchill tried. And we can see the good things that he did and then the places that he was too busy to do what he needed to do. And it is a sad fact of history that many successful, so-called great men and women of history did not have so great at kids. Marcus Aurelius' son sucks. Cyrus the Great's son sucks. Queen Elizabeth didn't have the most amazing children. Churchill's son was troubled. Why is that? Why were Gandhi's kids so troubled? And usually it's all that energy that they spent making the world better. They didn't spend that same kind of energy or attention at home. They spent a whole lot of energy trying to shape world events and less time trying to shape their family. Or in other cases, the forcefulness and the intensity with which they attacked big problems, they also directed on a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old or a kid who was very different than them. And so this is a fascinating parenting book that I always recommend. Another out-of-the-box sort of unknown parenting gem that I love, this is Kafka's Letter to the Father. So Kafka's this sensitive, kind of nerdy, bookish kid, and his father's this successful businessman, entrepreneur. Like I was saying with Churchill and his father, Churchill and his son, there was just a parent-child mismatch, or really that doesn't exist. The father didn't put in the time or energy to understand this very different person that lived with him. And what Kafka did was write this long letter to his father about what he wished his father had been, about all the areas that they didn't connect. He never sent it, but if you're familiar with like how a rehab works, one of the things they do is a family day, because addiction or problems in a person's life, it's usually related to the family of origin. And they have this sort of therapy day where the kids sort of finally vomit out and process all the feelings they have towards their parents. That's what this book is, and it's a fascinating look at a failed parental relationship, a cautionary tale. If you don't want to be a difficult, unapproving, sort of domineering parent like maybe yours were, this is a book you absolutely have to read. So this is a new one you probably haven't seen. So about a year ago, I took all my favorite lessons from these parenting books and from history and psychology, and I put them together, a 1-page-a-day book. It's called The Daily Dad. But we just did this cool, really awesome leather edition of The Daily Dad. It's got the 10 parenting commandments on the back. It's got these illustrations. That's me and my kids there. We did the Daily Stoic now 8 years ago. We did the leather edition 3 or 4 years ago now. Hundreds of thousands of people all over the world read the Daily Stoic every day, and tens of thousands of people all over the world read the Daily Dad every day. If you want to check out this new leather edition, you can check it out, dailydad.com/leather. I have 2 young boys, so I love this book of Boys and Men. Richard Reeves came and did the Daily Stoic podcast. Look, it's wonderful. All the gains that women have made in our society. Society should be equal. Everyone should thrive. And everyone should be able to do whatever they want. But he makes this fascinating point. For instance, there are more female fighter pilots than there are male kindergarten teachers, right? So there are just different professions that men don't feel comfortable going into. And there are more and more men who are struggling. I think 2/3 of college graduates now are women and not men. So this is like why that is. And I made a bunch of decisions. We held my oldest back a year for starting kindergarten because of this book. There's lots of great insights in here about why modern men are struggling. I think this is free of culture war nonsense. It's just a really important book that anyone who has boys or has boys in their extended family should absolutely read. I love this book. A couple other fun ones. I'll just bang into it real fast. This is The Self-Driven Child. I've interviewed both these guys twice. How do you raise kids that are self-sufficient, that don't need to be coddled, that can bounce back from failure like we're talking about, that have initiative, that can deal with what life throws at you? One of the things I talked to Dr. Becky about was like the skill of being able to handle and deal with frustration, being able to direct yourself in life through what life deals with you. That is the most key meta skill there is. I talk a lot about that in this book, so I love that one. I love this book, Nasty, Brutish, and Short, Philosophical Lessons from Kids. It's not so much a parenting book, but one of the things that happens when you have kids is you learn about yourself through them, and you can learn about the world through them. Just an absolutely hilarious, wonderful book. I think you'll like this too. Speaking of young boys or being a man, Michael Ian Black wrote this, he's the comedian, I think actually a really sensitive, open-minded book about being a different kind of man. I loved this book. It's a mostly serious letter he says to his son. This one's great. Maya Payne's smart book on how to teach your kids to read. Great book. Really like that one. Emily Oster's stuff, Cribsheet. Expecting Better is really good. My wife read this one, Letters to the Sons of Society. Really enjoyed that one. A letter from a father to their boys. Jessica Lahey, who wrote The Gift of Failure, has an awesome one here about she's an addict. And you know addiction is hereditary. So if your kids have that propensity through you or someone in your family, how can you set them up for success, or let's say minimize the risk of the opposite of success? I think that's a really important book. This book here was really influential to me as both a parent and as a child. Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. Unfortunately, emotionally immature parents is a great way to describe a huge chunk of the boomer generation, but I suspect it's true across all generations. Your parents were just people who met at some point, and they've got their own problems. And sometimes it's hard to see that. It's hard to see the patterns that you get trapped into. I think something like 20% of older parents these days is estranged from one or more of their children, just a very sad reality. But this book sort of explains why, what to do if that is even in the ballpark of your family of origin. I really liked this book. I got a lot out of it. Fair Play is a great book, not exactly a parenting book, but very important in a marriage or in a relationship. 5 Languages of Love is very good, of course. The Blank Slate, if you're wondering like why your kids are the way that they are, Steven Pinker has some fascinating stuff there on human development and human cognition. This story, Proust and the Squid, has a bunch of interesting insights into how we read and think. If you're trying to understand how your kids read and process language. Oh, over here, terrifyingly sad but wonderful book, Death Be Not Proud by John Gunther. I think this is a book that every parent has to read. It will break your heart, but it will also teach you so much. It's about a 16-year-old kid who has like terminal brain cancer, what his parents learned throughout the journey. Joan Didion writes 2 sort of heartbreaking parenting life books. The Year of Magical Thinking is about the loss of her husband, but then just a few months later, she loses her daughter, Quintana. That's Joan Didion's Blue Notes. Beautiful, amazing book. Totto-Chan, The Little Girl at the Window, is a wonderful and very beautiful, inspiring book about a young Japanese woman's unusual sort of Montessori-esque education. I absolutely loved this book. So great. Beautiful Boy by David Sheff, about a father and his son's addiction journey. I'd recommend that one too. Another sort of parenting book in disguise, David McCullough wrote this book about the Wright brothers, which obviously is largely about their experiments at Kitty Hawk and how they invented the airplane. But the first like third of the book is all just amazing parenting lessons from their father, Bishop Wright. Their dad was a bishop. You might have all these preconceptions, but he was like the least domineering. He never pushes his faith on his kids. He's so tolerant. Their sister says that like their mother and their father never threw away a single thing their kids were ever working on. They encouraged them to tinker. He would bring them home toys. The Wright brothers were the Wright brothers because of Bishop Wright. That's an amazing book. I absolutely loved that one. There's another, speaking of unusual families, parenting books in disguise. This book by David McCullough also, Mornings on Horseback. The first good chunk of it is about the early childhood of the Roosevelt family and how they cultivated a love of reading and adventure and public service and history, their travels. That no child grew up more surrounded by books, one of their biographers said, than the Roosevelts. They said Theodore Roosevelt was surrounded by the myths and stories of the great men of history, and then he was encouraged to be just like them. Absolutely amazing book. I love that one. This book is going to seem crazy because no parent wants their kid to fail. No parent wants their kid to be hurt. No one wants their kid to experience negative consequences to anything. But without that, we can't grow. And yet so many parents do precisely this. We deprive our kids of the gift of failure. This is one of the all-time great parenting books you should absolutely read. Almost all the essential lessons in life come from failure, come from discomfort, come from having to figure things out for yourself. And yet our instinct as parents deprive our kids of that very thing, right? And then the pressures, the competition that we feel with other parents and what we want our kids to end up, we just end up doing them an incredible disservice. You absolutely have to read this book. It's a must read for every parent. I'm lucky enough to have a bookstore, so I think about this stuff a lot, but I'm always looking for amazing parenting books. So if you have any you would recommend, definitely shoot me a recommendation in the comments. I read a lot. It's sort of my job. You can't write without reading. But for almost 15 years now, once a month, I send out an email with my favorite book recommendations for that month. Books that I've been reading, books that I've been going through, books that changed my life, that inspired me, that I think connect to what's happening in the world. And you could sign up right now at ryanholiday.net/reading list.